Welcome back, Gothamites. If you're new here, hi. I'm London, aka History of the Batman. Reading Batman comics or watching any Batman media is basically an escapism from the real world. Because if you haven't noticed lately, the world sucks a lot. However, there are many stories within Batman's 80-year mythos that have highlighted serious and real-life issues that may actually connect more with readers than just enjoying a normal adventure where Batman chases down a thief that stole some old lady's purse. A lot of times, having these serious issues at the core of these Batman stories can highlight this topic in a whole new way to this particular audience. So for this video, I will dive deep into many Batman comics that at its core discuss real-life issues, how these issues affect the fictional characters within this DC Comics universe, and the important lessons that readers can learn about these topics within the real world. But before we dive into these stories, why don't you subscribe to this channel and become part of this wonderful Gothamite community. I do want to put up a quick disclaimer before we jump into our list. I really wanted to do this video because, as I say, I love being realistic about my fiction, and these stories, although they are for entertainment, they do present really serious topics that I think everyone should give focus to, especially since in the real world, a lot of times these topics aren't taken as seriously as they should be. That being said, I'm not trying to capitalize on topics that maybe they're trendy to discuss right now or anything like that. I am doing this list because I feel like these serious topics in our favorite fictional universe should be addressed, and hopefully someone who never knew of any of these stories or even has read these stories will resonate with them in some way where they either want to seek help or they'll help others that they know that are dealing with these same issues. I am just diving into comics in a whole other realistic level. Alright, now we can begin. Our first story is Batman Venom. One of the best stories to come out of the 1990s. Dennis O'Neil and Trevor Von Eaton's Batman Venom deals with Bruce Wayne's fight with drug addiction. Originally published in 1991's Batman Legends of the Dark Knight issues 16 through 20. After Batman fails to save a young girl's life, he feels powerless and wants to better himself to assure that nothing like that ever happens again. This leads to meeting and speaking with the girl's father, who is now trying out a very experimental steroid drug called Venom. Batman decides to take this drug, and once he does, he feels amazing. He feels like he can do anything if he sets his mind to it while being high on this drug. But of course, like many addictive drugs, Batman begins to crave it once his supply runs very, very low. Batman gets to such a bad place that he has to call Alfred to ask for help, and then Batman decides to lock himself away for a month to wean himself off of this steroid drug. And after that, he returns to the Batman that he knew before. Or so he thinks. Batman Venom shows Batman as a human under the cape and the cowl, who succumbs to his own shortcomings, which evidently leads to the road of addiction. Although the recovering of this crippling drug addiction became his redemption in the story, Batman's victory in this and in the end of the story as a whole still lingers with failure and weakness on his part from being addicted to the drug in the first place and going into such a bad mindset and world that he had never experienced before. Batman Venom shows that even this character, who is one of the strongest willed beings in the entire DC universe, can fall to addiction and illness just like any one of us reading this comic. And reading about Batman's struggle and recovery can be a wonderful source to showcase to anyone that is struggling out there that there indeed is hope. And if you are struggling with a drug addiction or anything of the sort, you should definitely contact those to help you. Our next story is Batman Under the Hood. As I've discussed in further detail in my video, What is Batman's Religion?, which I will put in the description below, Batman for the most part is a man of logic and science and has a reasonable explanation for everything. But when it comes to the supernatural, at times he becomes perplexed in trying to rationalize these insane phenomena. One instance is in Judd Winnick and Matt Wagner's 2005-2006 book, Batman Under the Hood. After Bruce learns that Jason Todd, the second Robin, who has been long dead ever since he was murdered by the Joker, could actually be alive and is now running around as the persona of the New Red Hood, ruling Gotham's criminal underground, Batman has a very difficult time trying to figure out how in the world he can be alive. Batman asks Zatanna about Ra's al Ghul's Lazarus Pit and whether or not that can actually bring people back to life. Batman asks Jason Blood, aka Etrigan, what are the known ways in bringing people back from the dead? Batman even resorts to traveling to Metropolis to have a heart-to-heart with Superman, asking him how he came back to life in, of course, the arc, The Death of Superman. Because according to Bruce, particularly in this issue, he says the explanation always results in facts and science. Anything else doesn't seem right to him. Even when Batman and Jason Todd come face to face in this series, Batman still can't settle with the notion of it's up to God or anything of that nature. Under the Hood illustrates a true struggle with trying to rationalize the concept of the afterlife and resurrection for the Batman. This can also be relevant and even reflect on every single person, not just reading this, but in the world, trying to figure out what actually happens when we do leave this life. Is there an afterlife? Is there not? All of those burning questions that everyone in the world has had at least at one point in their life, Batman tries to figure out in this arc. To me, this story is one of the most humanizing and relatable stories that we see of Bruce Wayne and Batman trying to cope with such a huge question of the universe. And it's just a darn good read. Our next story is Ghost in the Machine. While in the real world, there may be homophobia among people who are just upset at the fact that characters such as Batwoman exist within the Batman universe, which if you do want to learn more about that character and other characters part of the LGBTQ community, I did an entire video on it and I will put it in the description below. In the Batman universe, Scott Snyder's character Cullen Rowe has unfortunately been the victim of bullying because he is gay. This is explored in Scott Snyder and James Tynion IV's story Ghost in the Machine, which was originally published in 2012's Batman issue number 12. Cullen Rowe, who is the brother of Harper Rowe, who actually becomes Bluebird within the Bat family, was jumped by a group of guys, beat up, and then they shaved their head and etched the word fag into it. And after Harper finds her brother, she actually shaves her head the same way they shaved Cullen's head to sympathize with him, which she's an awesome sister. The next time these boys try to jump Cullen, Harper is there to help, but then of course the amazing Batman swoops in to save not just Cullen but Harper, and at that moment Harper becomes amazed at the Dark Knight. Homophobia is obviously a major issue in the world. If heroes like Batman can protect victims of homophobia or any type of abuse, then guess what? You should too. And realize that every person, no matter what, deserves fundamental human rights, and they should not be ashamed for who they are. And I truly commend Snyder and James Tynion IV actually putting this story within the mainstream Batman continuity so many people can read it and maybe realize that these acts that these boys did to Cullen are absolutely wrong, not just in the DCU, but in the real world. And they should help anyone who is suffering or a victim of these heinous crimes. Our next story is Batman and Son, and our next topic is sexual assault or rape. I know this is a touchy subject, but it is one that is very important to highlight, since unfortunately, once again, sexual assault and rape is very common within the world, no matter where you live. And actually, many times, DC Comics has addressed the topic of sexual assault, and a lot of the DC Comics characters have been victims of assault or rape, both women and men. One instance that I actually have mentioned in my video, The Worst Things That Have Ever Happened to Batman, in the description below. And this is when Bruce Wayne's Batman learns that he was sexually assaulted by Talia al Ghul in Grant Morrison and Andy Kubert's 2006 arc, Batman and Son. In Batman issue 656 in particular, Talia al Ghul reminisces with Batman, who himself doesn't remember, but she drugged him, raped him in order to get herself pregnant, and through this very experimental process was able to birth Damian Wayne, who is their child, and Damian was raised by her father, Ra's al Ghul, and the League of Assassins. And then it's like, surprise, you have a son, here you go. And a lot of people at the time, when this story came out, were upset because Mike W. Barr in the late 80s wrote Batman, Son of the Demon, which not only had Batman and Talia get married, but they consummated the marriage and had consensual sex, which led to Talia being pregnant and in the end actually had Damian. But as I mentioned in the other video, Grant Morrison just didn't care about that. He just wanted to do his own story, so that's why we have this Talia assaulting Batman story, and that's how Damian came to be storyline. So there are actually other Bat family members who have been sexually assaulted in comics, from Nightwing to even Batwoman. And the fact that these writers, whether in these Batman stories or any other DC Comics stories, have tackled such a delicate subject, these fan favorite figures, I mean it's Batman for goodness sake, is actually an effective and good way to discuss this very sensitive topic with this audience, really showcase the trauma that an act such as this can bring, and hopefully we'll realize that in the real world, this same trauma exists. If you feel horrible for Batman and Batwoman and Nightwing and other characters who have been victims of sexual assault and rape, it's the same trauma on a bigger, more realistic level within our world. That is something that I hope readers realize and really think about after they read these stories. Our next tale is Batman the Cult. A very underrated story from the late 1980s. Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson's 4-issue arc, Batman the Cult, dives into the ever-true but horrifying reality of cults and brainwashing. In the story, after Batman is investigating a series of crimes that are happening in the Gotham City sewers, he's actually captured by these men who are led by the very insane Deacon Blackfire and is shackled and is down there for feels like forever. He is not only given food filled with drugs, but is just bombarded with religious propaganda, literally brainwashing him and convincing him that the world outside needs to be cleansed and eradicated because they are not good for the society that they want to build. That is some cult-ish, okay? And the worst part is, as Batman and the rest of this squad actually go up to the surface, they start pillaging and being violent and even killing people. Batman kills people in this series because he is just brainwashed and not himself. And it actually is up to the current Robin, Jason Todd, to help him snap out of it, and they both go and defeat Deacon Blackfire. Neither does Jim Starlin or anybody have to convince you that cults and brainwashing is bad, whether in the fictional world or in the real world. If you have something cult in your name, that is a really bad word because it has awful connotation. I'm just saying. Maybe rethink your brand. But Batman Cult ultimately shows that even Batman, who has one of the most strong-willed minds, period, can still succumb to being brainwashed into this murderous cult. This story really comes down to having the will and the power to push away literal demons from controlling and consuming your life, which is a powerful message that anyone reading this comic can appreciate. You may not be dealing with something as hardcore as a cult or brainwashing, but dealing with personal demons that you have and having the will to push them away and even seeking help when you do have those demons, it's even a better way to better yourself into the person you know that you are. Our next story is Eye of the Beholder. Now, there are many characters, in particular in Batman's huge villains gallery, that suffer from different mental illnesses or mental disorders. The one person that I think many people have to mention when you do discuss mental illness is, of course, Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face, and the fact that he has a split personality. Well, that diagnosis, which is a very common one for this character, isn't exactly correct. Technically, looking at the different interpretations of Two-Face, not just in the animated series, but also in comics and in film, shows that he basically has more borderline personality disorder than a split personality. But one of the first comics that really discusses Harvey Dent's mental illness and how that bleeds into him becoming Two-Face is Andrew Helfer's story, Eye of the Beholder, which was originally published in Batman Annual 14. While Commissioner Gordon, District Attorney Harvey Dent, and Batman try to think of a system that makes the GCPD stronger for the city, Harvey Dent's mental state begins to slowly deteriorate as he continues to visit his dying father in a senior citizen home. Now, his father, when he was young, was drunk and abusive to Harvey, so visiting his father not only triggers those horrible memories, but the last time he does see his father, he gives him a two-headed coin, which this action brings up paranoia and his bipolar disorder that hasn't been pronounced at all into his adulthood until now. So of course, what pushes Harvey completely over the edge is when Maroni throws acid in his face during court, disfiguring half his face, which transforms Harvey Dent into the villain Two-Face, using the two-headed coin that his father gave him into deciding whether or not he does good acts or bad acts. And even though his face was cured, his mind was still heavily scarred, and Two-Face even ruined the half of his face that just got plastic surgery and said, "This is the person I am now. I am Two-Face." Now, I cannot stress enough the importance of mental health and respecting and caring for those who suffer from mental illness and disorders. Mental wellness is just as important as physical wellness, and I hope you all really understand that, because there are many people out there that don't. Now, will people with bipolar disorder become criminals? Absolutely not. So don't have that as your takeaway from this story. But the point of reading this story isn't just to understand Two-Face more, but in a real sense. But if you personally are suffering from mental illness, disorder, anxiety, depression, anything, you should definitely speak to someone and seek help. Or if you know someone who is dealing with this, seek help for them. Our next story is Mad Love. I'm sure when you think of domestic violence within the DC Comics universe, automatically you think of the classic Harley Quinn and Joker relationship. And the reason I say classic, and I'm very happy to say classic, is because now the modern Harley Quinn, she is not that girl anymore. She is not the girl that is just fawning over Joker and is just kicked in the face for it. She has her own adventures in life and her own self that has nothing to do with Joker. She's not with Joker. She doesn't want to be with Joker. She sees that Joker is toxic. In her genesis, when she was created in the 1992 show Batman the Animated Series by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, she was seen as the Joker's henchwoman, the Joker's girlfriend, the Joker's sidekick. She was literally made to be an attachment to Joker. If we look in her early years, that is where the topic of domestic violence really comes in. If you are looking for a classic Harley Quinn and Joker story to really see this horrible dynamic, you gotta check out Paul Dini and Bruce Timm's 1994 one-shot graphic novel, The Batman Adventures Mad Love. Mad Love gives you Harley Quinn's origin for the very first time. You learn that she is the brilliant Dr. Harleen Quinzel, who begins interning at Arkham Asylum, and one of her patients that she gets to talk to is, of course, the Joker. And after listening to the Joker's stories about his life, because it's the Joker, so trust nothing he says, Harleen becomes enamored and falls in love with Joker. And the best part, after after he says all of that, thinks that it is Batman's fault that Joker is the way that he is. Because that's the takeaway that she should have got from that, but whatever. So to prove her love for Joker, Harley breaks into a costume shop, steals a jester costume and makeup, and then dresses up, becomes Harley Quinn, and breaks Joker out of jail. But along with this origin story, when we go back to the present, we see Joker being all kinds of just mean and cruel to Harley, especially when Joker's trying to think of the ultimate plan to kill Batman, and all Harley wants to do is maybe flirt a little or even bring in her own ideas to help her figure out how to kill the Batman. But of course, what does he do? He pushes her off a table to get out of his way. He kicks her out the door of their lair. He even throws her out the window. What? Now, while the more proper term for what Harley is suffering is shared psychotic disorder, and not necessarily Stockholm syndrome, because she put herself into this relationship, she wasn't kidnapped and decided to fall in love with her kidnapper. That's the big difference here. Does have a romantic, more or less, relationship with this person who literally beats her and then smiles and says, "Oh, you're the greatest." That's domestic violence and manipulation at its finest within the Batman universe. And then of course you do have other stories, such as in The Winding Gyre, when Batman becomes super paranoid after telling Silver St. Cloud that he is Batman, and after he proposes to her and thinks she's like some weird spy robot thing, and then just beats the crap out of her face. That's technically domestic violence as well, but we'll just focus on Joker and Harley for the moment. On a real note, if you are suffering from domestic violence, or you know someone who is in a situation where they are suffering from domestic violence, please contact people who can help you within this horrific situation, because no one deserves to be beaten up by someone that they love, especially with someone who you share your trust and love with, and they are treating you like dog crap. That is never okay in the fictional world and in the real world. And I say this anytime I talk about Joker and Harley: do not romanticize their relationship. Do not say, "Ooh, I want a boyfriend or a relationship like Joker and Harley." No, you don't. Because no one likes to get kicked in the face because they just want a hug. You know what I mean? I think the most serious takeaway you should take from this clown couple isn't that, ooh, their goals. It's, ooh, call the police. I'm just saying. Our next two stories are Batman the Ultimate Evil and Batman Night Cries. Now, I gave two stories for this particular topic because it is probably one of the most uncomfortable and heartbreaking topics on this list, if you can believe it, because all of these things are very heavy topics, and that is child abuse and child trafficking, which, similar to a cult or the brainwashing that we discussed earlier, you may think doesn't really happen a lot. It's not something that maybe you see in your own life, so you may not think that it's happening, but trust me, around the world, these horrible acts are happening. Our first story is Andrew Voss's 1995 book, Batman the Ultimate Evil. After Bruce Wayne starts working with a social worker named Deborah Kane, investigating child abuse within Gotham City, Bruce and Alfred Pennyworth actually learn that Bruce's mother, Martha Wayne, while she was alive, was actually trying to investigate and break up a pedophile ring that was happening in the center of Gotham. But because Martha was trying to do some good, her and Thomas were gunned down because of it. Now that Bruce knows the truth about his mother's crusade for justice and her ultimate price for it, Bruce, as Batman, decides to dive deeper into his mother's work and discovers that in Southeast Asia there's actually child sex tourism going on that is disgustingly thriving. So Batman travels there to stop this injustice and save the children, feeling that in this way he really has avenged his parents' death and completed his mother's work. This story is a very underrated essential for different reasons. One, because we actually learn more about Martha Wayne and not just the fact that she was gunned down in an alley. So I always love those stories. But also at the end of this book, there is actually a full essay that's nonfiction that actually talks about child sex tourism and how you can help stop it. The second story in this topic is Archie Goodwin and Scott Hampton's 1992 book, Batman Night Cries. In this story, both Batman and Commissioner Gordon team up to begin investigating child abuse within homes of Gotham City, and the fact that there is someone murdering the parents who abuse the children. So the story not only deals with trying to track down the murderer and protect the kids, but it also dives into both of the protagonists looking into their own lives and what abuse that they have gone through, whether in childhood or in adulthood. Well, in the end, everything's wrapped up in a nice bow. They figured out who the murderer is, things like that. Batman and Commissioner Gordon really come to the gut-wrenching realization that even though they caught this killer, there are still parents who are abusing their children and beating their children inside their own homes, and they can't stop everybody. It's just impossible to stop every single child from being hurt and abused. I think both of these stories do shine light, especially to readers who pick up these comics or these graphic novels and really don't know much about child abuse within the home or in other circumstances, and maybe that will not only give them awareness to what is happening in the real world, and maybe want to try to figure out how they themselves can help those who are in need. Our last story on this list is I Am Suicide. I left this story last on our list because while all of these stories are essential for you to read when wanting to really dive into real world issues presented in a fictional context, I feel like this last story is not only one of the most necessary to read on this list, the topic itself needs to be taken way more seriously within our real world. In Tom King and Michael Janin's 2017 story arc, I Am Suicide, in particular Part 4, which was published in Batman issue 12, in a letter that Bruce Wayne writes to Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, Bruce actually opens up more than probably he has ever done before and talks about how his parents' death at a very young age resulted in him wanting to take his own life. At the age of 10, he found his father's razor blades and wanted to cut his own wrists because he felt like without his parents, there was no one there. His life was just filled with pain and sadness that he felt like he couldn't get over, even at the tender age of 10. But once he has the razor blade in hands, close to his wrist, and he is sitting in front of his parents' portrait, he asks for their help. He asks for God's help. He asks for any type of help, and no one answers him. And at that point, he realizes that Bruce Wayne is dead. That the Bruce Wayne that he knew, even though he is 10 years old, is not the same Bruce Wayne that will go on and live life. But the Bruce Wayne that is alive, the Bruce Wayne that will go forward, is the one that swears to avenge his parents' death by protecting the city from any and all criminals, which is the reason why later in life he transforms into the Batman. I remember first reading this story and I was in awe, and I literally wanted to applaud Tom King talking about a very young boy wanting to take his own life is heartbreakingly, and almost makes me want to cry, so relevant to what's happening in the world. There are kids, there are young adults, there are adults from different ages who feel so hopeless that they don't think that there's any other way than to take their own life. I can't explain to you how important it is to read this issue. I can't explain to you how important it is to take suicide seriously. I can't express how important it is if you see someone who is feeling hopeless, who is alone, who doesn't know what to do, and they are thinking about harming themselves in any way. That is something so important that if you see it, please talk to that person. bring them to someone they can talk to. If you feel that way, know that you're not alone. I just feel like this story and all of the other stories really that we covered in this video, they are all real life things that people like us, not just characters in a comic book, but real people go through and suffer through. We are all a community, whether it is here on YouTube in the Batman community, just in life. We are a community. We are a social group. Helping one another is the only way that we can help have the world not suck as much as it has been lately. Comics are escapism. We love it. That's why we read comics, go see the movies, all of that stuff. Sometimes it does take a comic that we do really take seriously. We love the characters as much as real people to see that they can go through real emotions as well, and that we should take that into consideration and reflect upon that in our real life and see how we can make the world better. And if Batman's the person to tell you that you should make the world better and that you don't need to lose hope and you can be better yourself, then listen to Batman. Thank you guys so much for watching this video about the top Batman comics that dealt with real life issues. If you enjoyed this video, please give a bat thumbs up. If you watch this video and you are suffering from any of the topics that we have discussed, in the description below, I am putting different numbers that you can call that are helplines, lifelines, that if you do need to talk to somebody, they are all there to help 24/7. So if you are looking for a particular number or a source to help, that is all in the description below for your guys' disposal. As always, all of my social media is linked in the description below, including Instagram at History of the Batman. So why don't you give it a follow and become a Gothamite? Check out my column Beyond the Batcave for Comicosity and my latest Why Detective Comics is Batman's Lifeline. Check out my videos for DC Comics DC Fans channel. And of course, please subscribe to this channel so you can become part of this Batman community. It would mean so much to me. Thank you so much for watching, and we will have more History of the Batman very soon, right here on YouTube. Remember, Gothamites, all about peace, love, and Batman. Bye.